So by the time of the release of this video, the Backrooms movie will have come out, which got me thinking about internet horror. What I think has always stuck out to me about internet-based horror is how malleable it is. What I mean by this is that many of these stories originate from anonymous or even unknown authors and are expanded upon by various users. For example, the original Backrooms story was created by an anonymous poster on 4chan in 2019. This couple-sentence story from a complete unknown creator birthed an entire mythos: short stories, YouTube series, video games, and now a feature-length film. These stories that are birthed on message boards and forums have broken through into the mainstream. For a lot of people, this movie might end up being their introduction to internet horror, but for this video, I'd like to revisit my entry point into the subgenre, creepypasta. As someone that was in middle school during the early 2010s and also had unrestricted internet access, I was a massive fan of creepypasta. I think what made it stick out to me in comparison to horror movies was how believable the stories were. Obviously, when you're watching a movie, you know it's fictitious. Well, not always, if it's something like Cannibal Holocaust or the Blair Witch Project. A lot of these stories are delivered through forum posts, email chains, blog entries, and videos. Even the Backrooms' most striking element is the very odd-looking office building that accompanies the original post. It's the user-generated aspect that I always enjoyed, and have continued to enjoy as internet horror has evolved over time. So I thought it would be fun to revisit several notable creepypastas to see how they hold up upon reevaluation. So this is one that most of my interest in is tangential to the actual story itself. I don't think I have to be the one to tell you that the actual story of Jeff the Killer is bad. It's textbook, edgy, preteen revenge fantasy with no through line. It's a commonality among a lot of famous creepypastas to feature over-the-top violence and gore. Now, I'm no prude, of course, but here it serves as nothing more than shock value, which is usually the cheapest and laziest implementation of intense violence. It's also just really dumb, too. Like, Jeff and the bullies are having a GTA Online deathmatch at this kid's birthday party, and none of the adults intervene whatsoever. To its credit, this is touching on the apathy that some parents can have towards their children, which is definitely a point that the story is trying to allude to, but doesn't follow through with. Like, instead of exploring the ways that disaffected youth can turn down dark paths due to parental negligence, could have been an interesting route for the story to take, horror is at its best when it's reflecting on the darker and more troubling aspects of society, especially familial ones. But Jeff the Killer is just edgy murderer guy. This was one where, at the time, even in middle school, I didn't really even like the story. Like, even though Jeff literally got set on fire, he not only just doesn't die, but just has his skin turn snow white instead of being completely disfigured. Honestly, this story existed largely as a vessel for the preteen girl fanfic community, where they ship him with other creepypasta characters like Eyeless Jack. Nothing wrong with that, of course, but just not what I'm looking for in fiction. And I actually find the fan artification of Jeff to be really interesting because I've always found the associated image of him to be really effective. This picture is genuinely really creepy and has always made me feel uneasy every time I see it. I think what makes it so effective is that it's clearly a real photo of a person that has been heavily warped and edited to give Jeff his unnatural black eyes and Glasgow smile. We'll call it digital mutilation. No better time to segue into the more interesting discussion around Jeff the Killer, the origins of this image. So the actual story of Jeff the Killer hasn't stood the test of time and is largely ridiculed by most people, but what has been at the forefront of most people's minds is the origins of this picture. As of the making of this video, nobody knows where this picture actually comes from and what the unedited version looks like. I don't want to go too deep into it because it's a lot. But the simple version is that the guy who claims to have created Jeff the Killer, who goes by Cessware online, said that the image is a picture he took of himself wearing a white mask. This was debunked, however, as the image was traced back to Japanese message boards from as far back as 2005. predating Suswer's first known instance of posting the image in 2008. There were claims that the image was of a woman named Katie Robinson, who posted a picture of herself to 4chan's B board and was relentlessly mocked with edits of the image. This has also been debunked, but isn't too far off from the most likely origin of the image coming from a forum or streaming site during the mid-2000s. Blame It on Jorge has a really good comprehensive breakdown of this rabbit hole that I recommend if you're a Lost Media fan. I find it fascinating how the mysterious source of Jeff's face has eclipsed the original story that it comes from. It really is a testament to the transformative nature of the internet and internet subcultures. Plus, I mean, the image is so popular and is used in so many memes that people know what it is without having even heard of the creepypasta. A creepypasta which is largely forgettable and very much a product of its time, no less deserving of reevaluation, of course. Now, moving on to one that I actually like, Smile Dog is a creepypasta that succeeds in its evocative imagery and storytelling. What I like about Smile Dog is that it effectively utilizes the internet to format the story. It exists as what I would refer to as digital horror, utilizing digital technology as a means to tell the story. What VHS is to analog horror, JPEG files are to digital horror. The idea of a cursed JPEG being spread through email, mentally torturing those who are unlucky enough to click on it, is a very clever evolution of the urban legend format of storytelling. It's a translation of old folk tales into the information age, opting for email correspondence over word of mouth. Plus, Smile Dog is basically a cognitohazard, which is its own genre of horror that I'm really into. And the best part is that it feels believable. There are so many elusive and uncharted corners of the internet, with the entire deep and dark web being the boogeyman to the average user. Now, the dark web is mostly a hub for illicit material and illegal activity. You're not likely to find any haunted dog pictures, not that you'd want to anyway. But it furthers my point that there's a near bottomless pit of information and content on the internet that most of us have barely even scratched the surface of. It's akin to an iceberg, if you will. I haven't made one of those videos yet, but I may in the future. That very concept is terrifying on its own. Who's to say that there isn't a real Smile Dog out there, just waiting to be seen by an unlucky soul? The uncertainty is what also works to the story's benefit, as well, as the protagonist isn't even sure if Smile Dog exists. The claims of exposure to the image causing fits of epilepsy and nightmares give an air of unreliability to those who have seen it. Within the context of the story, the image itself is basically lost media, having never been saved by anyone, and the only physically saved copy of the image being destroyed. It's kind of ironic as well, since, like Jeff the Killer, the origins of the Smile Dog image are also unknown. It's like a fictionalized version of a real-life lost media hunt, only instead of the Backyardigans pilot, it's a fucked up looking dog. The method by which the protagonist ends up receiving the image is interesting because it plays out like a modern day data breach. I, like probably most of you, have had my email and phone number completely compromised by the egregious data usage of basically every website and app. I get so much spam that there are times where I consider getting a new phone number altogether. It is genuinely frightening receiving junk emails and texts claiming to be like debt collectors trying to con you. It's easy to tell that they're bogus upon closer inspection, of course, but it's scary to think that there are people out there like that who have the intent to do this to you with free access to your information. Even scarier to think that now it might not even be a real person, but an AI doing it. And that's what makes the final email in the story so scary to me. Someone, or something, was able to find OP's info and basically doom them for eternity. Plus, the twist of the author turning around and dooming the reader at the end is the cherry on top. It's really interesting to revisit this one in particular, as the internet and the way we engage with the internet has changed so much. Unironically now, it's gotten to a point where there are things on the internet that genuinely do cause people mental distress and psychosis. The proliferation of AI and misinformation all being monetizable on platforms like X have caused a lot of damage to the way we engage with each other online, warping reality and causing an erosion of trust. I know that's a lot to extrapolate from the story, but that shows there's more to it than just the creepy image associated with it. Those images, rather, are even creepier to me than Jeff the Killer. Whenever I would be reading creepypasta at 3 a.m., I would get really unnerved anytime Smile Dog would pop up. I still do, in fact. as it elicits this feeling in me like I'm looking at something that I'm not supposed to. Like, even though it's pixels on your screen, it feels like it could be there even if you turn your monitor off. The floppy disk that the image was stored on made a hissing sound when it was burned, after all. So suffice it to say, Smile Dog holds up, and even offers something new upon further inspection. So for this one, I'm kind of lumping multiple creepypastas together as they're largely similar in concept, those being lost episodes of kids shows. I mentioned it earlier, but I'm a big fan of lost media. The idea of a film or song being unavailable for a multitude of reasons, but just barely within reach of dedicated hunters is very tantalizing. The stories behind why things become lost is what's always intrigued me the most, with cases ranging from studio interference to lack of awareness from the creator. For as much fanfare as there is for things even as mundane as Celebrity Number 6, what could be more invigorating than lost, disturbing episodes of your favorite cartoons? For as interesting as the premise sounds, this genre of creepypasta is largely a mixed bag for me. Unfortunately, a lot of them are far too tropey and indulgent for my liking. Like, Dead Bart does land on a genuinely interesting idea of The Simpsons predicting the deaths of every guest star they'll ever have, which ultimately culminates in some kind of future mass tragedy. However, that only comes at the very end, while spending most of its time on hyper-realistic depictions of Bart's death and mangled corpse. Hyper-realistic was a very common adjective for a lot of these creepypastas, reveling in the depiction of intense blood and gore in otherwise family-friendly media. Blood and gore that is made all the more ridiculous by the inclusion of Matt Groening as the catalyst for OP actually finding the Dead Bart episode. Like, OP meets Groening at a con, and he just gives him the link to watch the episode online. Not a secret reel locked away in the Fox vaults or Groening's personal archives, just a link to a random website that hosts the episode. In this instance, it would make way more sense for the episode to be viewed in its original analog format as opposed to digital, since the episode is supposed to be from season 1 of The Simpsons, which began in 1989. Like, Matt Groening is depicted as paranoid and troubled by the existence of the episode, yet he went out of his way to convert the original footage and upload it to the internet. That being said, I think there is some merit to the idea of this being a failed attempt at a serious, dark story that the creators wanted to bury due to the shame and embarrassment for how it turned out. It kind of makes me think of the lost Jerry Lewis film, The Day the Clown Cried, which depicted Lewis as a clown that tries to cheer up people in a concentration camp during World War II. If that premise sounds insane and inappropriate to you, that's what the people behind the production also thought, which led to the premature cancellation and prevention of the film from ever being seen. A reconstructed version of the film is actually available for screening at the Library of Congress, but I'm pretty sure you need special permission to make an appointment to watch it. But that film was an earnest attempt by a Jewish actor to explore the most horrific crime in human history from a comedic perspective less than 30 years removed from said event. It was one of those things that they thought just shouldn't be seen by anyone. And I like that idea in Dead Bart. Groening and co. attempting to do a morbid, reverse, It's a Wonderful Life story, but failing so spectacularly that they bury any evidence of its existence sounds cool on paper, but is very different from what we get in the actual story. It's mostly just, here's Bart's hyper-realistic dead body. Bart's hyper-realistic dead body is even just laying on top of his gravestone for everyone to gawk at. Dead Bart ended up just being frustrating to me because there is potential for an interesting story in here, but it's too unfocused to stick the landing. It's like the author came up with the title and wrote a story around it. Like, yeah, I wonder what would happen if Bart Simpson got sucked out of an airplane and died horrifically. Unlike Dead Bart, a creepypasta that I cannot find any merit in is Squidward's suicide. This is another of those images that has been memed to hell and back, going as far as being referenced in an actual episode of Modern SpongeBob. It was one that I prematurely felt no scare factor from due to its memification, but I did not anticipate the disdain that I would end up feeling towards it. I usually try to find positives in things that I'm not even enjoying for the most part, as I think every creative work is deserving of a chance. However, I could not find any positives while reading Squidward's suicide. Like I had mentioned during the Jeff the Killer segment, I find shock value to be mostly lazy. There are instances where I think it works, when there's clear artistic and thematic intent behind the depiction of disturbing subject matter. Examples for me include the works of directors like David Lynch and Michael Haneke. But I think shock value for the sake of shock value is slop, for the lack of a better term. And that's exactly what we have here with Squidward's suicide. The same tropey premise of OP viewing an episode of a cartoon, but something isn't quite right. Only this time the difference being that OP is an animation intern at Nickelodeon, getting a preview for an episode of SpongeBob with the working title Squidward's Suicide. It has a lot of the same concepts as Dead Bart, such as hyper-realistic depictions of characters and realistic, non-acted crying and screaming. But what ends up differentiating Squidward's suicide and disqualifying it, in my mind, is the depiction of dead, mutilated children. Like, it goes from lingering on Squidward being sad that everyone booed him during his clarinet performance, to describing multiple photos of real-life gore and death being intercut into the footage. The episode ultimately ends with Squidward blowing his brains out with a shotgun. This creepypasta is very egregious with its use of hyper-realistic as a descriptor, and there's a particular emphasis on the children and Squidward's eyes popping out of their heads. I'm not sorry, but this is just irredeemably lazy and upsetting. Like, at least Dead Bart tried to do something interesting with the whole prediction of deaths, but there is just nothing of value here. They couldn't think of an interesting premise for why the episode would be lost, so they just decided to go for including a child getting his entrails pulled out of him. There's no point being made for something like the complacency we have towards the depiction of violence in media. I don't think it's going for that, but it also doesn't work as just a generic scary story because the subjects being harmed are children. Like, it would have been forgettable if we're adults, but of course it had to be children to give it that cheap shock factor. All of this in a fucking lost episode of SpongeBob to boot. It does the thing that Dead Bart did where it includes the real-life creator of SpongeBob, Steven Hillenburg, in the story, but this time he's not responsible for the creation of the episode, as he has no idea who could have tampered with it. Nobody knows, in fact, as any possible evidence of editing is completely missing from the studio. There isn't even any culpability in the creation of the episode here, unlike Dead Bart, where this episode just mysteriously happens to have images of real dead children and Squidward killing himself in excruciating detail. This is one where, like Jeff the Killer, people only remember it for its memified cover image, and I'd like to keep it that way. By far the worst of the creepypastas I've covered today. So, to round out this section and the video, I'll balance out the last two entries, being mid and bad, with a lost media pasta that I really like. That being Candle Cove. What separates Candle Cove from the previous entries is that the show is an entirely original concept, instead of being a fictionalized entry in a real show. But it also has an air of believability to it, as the show is described as being a local kids show that aired in the early 1970s between Ohio and Kentucky. This being pre-internet, I can totally buy the idea of there being a reel of the show just sitting in the basement of a TV station, no one even knowing it's there. But what really sells it for me is the way in which the story is told. Like Smile Dog, Candle Cove utilizes the internet as the means to deliver the story, being written as replies from multiple people on a nostalgia forum, with memory and its unreliability being the driving force behind how the story is unraveled. The story opens with a complete shot in the dark from the first poster on the forum, having not been able to find any reference to Candle Cove anywhere online. From the mention of the name, more people reply to the original post, extrapolating bits and pieces of information that they remember, such as characters' names and the quality of the production. What starts as nostalgic reminiscing spirals into traumatic recollection as more vivid memories of the show are brought to light. Horace Horrible's visage being comprised entirely of a tall, toothy smile, a large mustache, and a monocle, as well as even the notion of a character like the Skin Taker, paint the picture of a show that is very much not appropriate for the audience it's aiming for. In real life, those memories of uncharacteristically dark or frightening moments in kids shows always stick out to me and kind of serve as defining moments in adolescence. Like for me, I remember just not having the courage to watch Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island because it was genuinely frightening to me. Anytime I went out in the woods, I thought there was a chance zombies would just sprout out from the ground. But what's interesting about the traumatic memories in Candle Cove is that they were mostly forgotten by the people on the forum until OP reminded them. Such vivid descriptions of characters and voice lines came flooding back to the people in the thread, but it's almost like they weren't there at all before that point. This culminates with one of the posters recounting a recurring nightmare they had about the show, where the characters would flail around screaming relentlessly. The main character of the show, Janice, being subject to this torture for what seemed like hours, crying in despair. Replies to this post disputed the notion of it being a nightmare, as they remember seeing this exact scenario on the TV itself. The thread and story ends with a final entry describing how the poster asked their elderly mother if she had any memory of Candle Cove, to which she responds by wondering how they could even remember something like that, since anytime they said they were going to watch Candle Cove, they would just sit in front of the TV watching static for 30 minutes. Now, what I love so much about this story is that the Creepy Kids show isn't even what's scary about it. It's the collective false memory only existing within a few people that is genuinely terrifying to me. Memory in general is something that kind of scares me on an existential level. Moments of our lives, the good and the bad, all exist within our memory in this plane of existence that's almost different from our current reality. For me, they have this haziness or glow to them, almost like they're reels of film that have been damaged over time. They're things that did happen, but they have our own biases and perspectives wrapped around them. They're something entirely different. They're not accurate depictions of the past. They're memories. They're us. They're our reality, independent of the objective reality around us. And that's what scares me so much about something like Alzheimer's, because what are we if not our memories? So for this story to not only make Candle Cove a false memory, but one that multiple people share elicits in me a feeling of existential dread, because Candle Cove is simultaneously real, but also not real. All of these people recount having watched it and had similar experiences, but the ending suggests that it was purely a product of children's vivid imagination. But it's a memory shared by complete strangers who have never met each other before, that supposedly only exists in the form of TV static. I love too how this is the end of the story. Just the right amount of ambiguity to make you rethink your own experiences, and just how reliable our memories really are. And that brings us to the end of the video. This was a fun way to revisit a lot of the stepping stones that laid the path for the success of things like the backrooms in the modern era. If I ever end up doing a part 2 to this video, I think it would probably be a more dedicated, like, single video about Slender Man, because he's obviously the most popular creepypasta probably ever, for a lot of good reasons, but also some very troubling, bad reasons. If you would like to see that video, please let me know in the comments below. And besides that, all more I really have to say is just thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and maybe consider subscribing. More videos are on their way, so stay tuned.